Caroline Rena, and this is my brand new podcast, Awakening Soul Divinity. And I am really excited today to welcome Noel New, and I'm really excited to have him on here. And I just want to say welcome, Noel.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to be doing this with you. We were just talking off camera. This is one of many we've done over the years. So I'm excited about this because I know it's a new venture going in a direction where you really want to go, which is awesome.
Well, and that's kind of the point of having you on here, because it kind of moves into where you want to go also, which was interesting how we kind of ended up here from going this way and then coming back in and getting back to this place again. So I thought it was, yeah, we've gone through many iterations even in this lifetime. We played music together, we did the podcast, like he said, the other podcasts related to the music we did. Then when I opened the group up, the Old Soul Highly Sensitive and Empath group, well, that was all part of his direction at this point anyway, as he's working with empaths. So in our communications, let's say, over the last years, being able to work through understanding about ourselves and each other through the music and through lots and lots and lots and lots of talking. Again, welcome. And I'd love for you to explain what kind of work you're doing in the world, just kind of give an overall picture of what you're working on right now.
Okay, so I mean, basically, I've had my private practice now 17 years, almost 18, and I'm grateful and blessed to be able to do it this long and to have it, an ongoing active practice. Over the years, it's, evolved, developed, shifted, and lately, within the last few years, both from personally, which we'll go into further in a little bit, but also professionally, I've really dialed into empaths and being one myself, and the nature of relationships, and where the relationships get very tangled and confusing, and how to bring that back. First, how to become aware of it, and how to work through that within self and with another. Um, in that order, really, it's really important. And that's been kind of like what my specialty is. So I've been developing that in my practice, and I'm writing a book currently, which I'm looking to have out hopefully next year at the latest. And really just kind of, go along that and really dial in on helping empaths in relationships.
Yeah, that's wonderful. There's been research along the lines of how empaths and narcissists get attracted together in relationship. I'm curious to know if you could give a little bit of understanding as to why, because I do get a lot of questions in the group that I have, especially where the wonderings of why do I keep attracting this type of person into my life. Can you give like a little bit of a understanding for that or explanation?
Yeah, I mean, really, just in general. So the narcissistic type of person, and that, doesn't have to also be a narcissistic personality disorder. Somebody who's more self-absorbed, more comes through the filter of self, is somebody that gives a little but takes mostly, taking. Whereas empathic person is somebody that, is giving and finds, that energy through the giving, and helping to care for with somebody else, because that's the whole thing of empathy, is feeling what somebody else is feeling. So where it goes into that, kind of that and that disconnection of
Yeah.
attraction,
Yeah.
it's an attraction to be disconnected in, is where, the narcissistic person is a little bit more obtuse with it, more extreme in that, and the empathic person is more codependent, where they're trying to um, get some relief from the giving to this one person that is always taking. And at first it's very wonderful and exciting and thrilling and engaging. And then it turns, on its head into challenge and
Flip right upside down.
yes.
Yeah. And it's what's interesting about all that is that for me, what I discovered was there was almost a desperation to make sure that the other was in the codependency, to make sure that the other person was always okay. And then I just kind of bleeped me out of the picture. And it was a struggle for me to understand that until I started to realize what was going on and to start to see what I was doing in that thing. But it took a lot. I mean, when it was not an easy work through to get through that, and for me, I did it with my own trying to understand, analyze, and do my research. You know what I'm talking about, the research and the analyzing and the beating myself up and all this stuff. But when there's someone who understands how to get through something like that from experience, it's so much easier to share that information for people who can grasp it and just at least try to walk through what many other people have experienced with growing and healing from a narcissistic relationship. And I mean, we could go off on a tangent with narcissists. I don't want to even go there because that's not the point. We're trying to, this is awakening soul divinity. Yeah, but that kind of gives an idea of I really feel like we were put on this earth to experience that we wanted to experience these types of relationships so we could grow, because we're here for a reason as empaths for whatever the future holds. Anything, do you have?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's what, and you say the soul divinity of somebody who's empathic is this wanting to help or to heal or to, naturally. And
Mhm.
somebody who is narcissistic is injured, they're wounded. The challenge is it's a wound that the narcissist rarely, if it's a true, on the spectrum of narcissism all the way over, if it's true narcissism, they cannot, because they cannot see it. They will not. The defense is too strong. So the empath is trying to heal that is where the codependency comes in. And that's where the empath's wounding is rooted in, to find their needs met in this lifetime
Mhm.
by being seen, being needed, being recognized in some form or fashion
Yeah.
from at least that person.
Right.
And it's a trap where it doesn't happen. So
Right.
when the empath breaks through the codependency, you, we, us, they can feel just that empathy, that empathic nature towards anybody, including somebody who's narcissistic, and be able to let go, and be able to, release from the attachment to wanting to make
Mhm.
sure there's
Mhm.
somebody they're better.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you said that, because I was just writing down, for me, there was a desperation. There was a
Mm.
desperation to help this other person. And I noticed again in the group where people just want to be there and help because they know what the pain feels like because of the empathy, the empathic nature. And so when you know what pain feels like, you don't want anybody else to suffer. And that's a natural thing for empaths. And it's challenging that's one of the reasons it's challenging, especially if you've experienced trauma in your life, because you don't know who you are from anyone else. So that's why it all mixes in together based off of the empathic nature and based off of a trauma at the same time. Would you agree with that?
Yes, because that's where the kind of the lines get crossed from just having that healthy empathy, that care and concern and connection, to heal and to help. And it gets crossed into that's where our identity comes from. That's where our well-being, our safety, our security, because of the traumatic neglect, abuse, rejection, abandonment, whether real or perceived, for a
Mhm.
child. It's never perceived in the sense that it might not be as obtuse or extreme, but it's still, you know, the people are there, but they're not there. Nobody's home for the kid and the child. And that's where a child with a strong sense of empathy and a high development of awareness then starts to create, where it kind of gets wounded and triggered into this need to be needed.
Yeah, and perception though has a big emphasis on all of this, because just because we think we remember or have a memory of something, it's 11:11 by the way. At least on that clock. I just had to say that. Um they may not have it's like a subconscious, it's not necessarily correct. We don't, just because we remember something from our childhood doesn't mean that that's exactly what happened, because you can go down that direction where you got siblings, like three siblings, and mom and
Yeah.
dad were arguing or whatever, and all three siblings have a different story, so the perception
Right.
seems to add into this also.
Is huge. And but remember, as our brains are developing from especially those younger ages up, I mean, 0 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, 6 to 10, 10 to 14,
Mm-hmm.
and 14 to 18, those are developing brain development where things that happen then, even if they're perceived, the child is perceiving it based on its natural, visceral reaction. It's all emotional. It's an emotional feeling and it's an intense feeling. And so that's why, they say, the kind of the key to parenting is not really, no parent necessarily knows what to do, but to just stay present and connected to the child, whatever that
Mm-hmm.
child's experiencing. And again, it's not to make that's going to be perfect all the time. It's a challenge, and especially when the ones before us didn't do it that well and so on and so forth, or had
Right,
trouble with it.
right,
So
right.
it kind of carries through. So
Yeah.
but yeah, so the empathic child is extra aware and extra sensitive. So even a perceived thing is still the visceral nature of that wound is, very, it can be very pervasive. You know what I mean? It
Mm-hmm.
is, very set in its nature to create a different, where the attraction towards later on in life is to try to heal that
Yeah.
through this narcissist slash, helping slash taking care of slash, not getting any.
Opportunity. Opportunity.
Yes.
There,
Yeah.
I call it an opportunity. Yeah. And on that note, I have a couple of questions from both of those. The first one is, I've not concluded, but watched kind of two different sides on the highly sensitive person and the empath. It seems like there's a traumatized version that creates the high sensitivity
Mm.
and the empath. And then there's the traits, like a natural trait of a natural highly sensitive person and empath. So you've got the traumatized empaths and you've got the trait empaths. What does that sound like to you when I say that?
Yeah, I mean, no, it makes sense. I mean, naturally empaths are going to be more sensitive, right? The HSP, the highly sensitive person, is even more so, right? It's because also the central nervous system and the all the senses are heightened, whereas an empath may have just yes, the empath may have just the sense, just this kind of cognitive, emotional, awareness sensitivity, which is,
Mm-hmm.
on a higher level, whereas the HSP will have it on almost every level,
Well,
right? I mean,
we feel things like very deep,
yes,
very
right.
deeply. Everything
Well,
is felt deeply.
and everything is magnified in all the
Yes.
different senses.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that kind of wounding for that person is going to be probably more pronounced or you know, affected by because of that deep sensitivity at a young age where, and that's what, that's where it all happens because at a young age we have this all these gifts already, like,
Mm-hmm.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, but we have no way of knowing how to deal with that, at those ages. I mean, there's no possible way we would
Some
know how to
people
deal
still
with that.
don't know how to deal with
Well,
it.
of course. Well, but that's based on not getting it, not
Yeah.
having people present in the early stages.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then the kind of the isms develop to try to survive that create it all the way into 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, any age,
Mm-hmm.
still not being able to process it because of those early, developmental stages where the sensitivity, the intensity was pronounced, and there's no school of how to deal with it. You know what I mean? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it goes back to the Star Wars with the Jedi. The Force is strong in this one, but it's a little kid. How do what do you have to do? It's a
Yeah.
Padawan, he or she,
Yeah.
they're a Padawan. So we need that kind of, so then we learn that. So the process that we teach and learn, both we teach to learn, is, doing that with ourselves, holding ourselves as that accountability of connection so that we can be use our powers or superpowers of empathy and sensitivity and awareness, for the greater good coming
Yes.
from ourselves.
Yes. Yes. And that's one of the most important things that I've discovered is we can't heal the world if we're in a hole.
Yeah.
If we're in a trauma hole, if we're in a stress hole, if we're in a grief hole, we can't be trying to help other people because we're in it. It just doesn't,
Yes.
they don't go together. The other question I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the piece about the spectrum of narcissism. One of the things I've noticed about that is now I've experienced a few narcissists in my life. And I found that there is a spectrum because and then there's also the overt narcissist and the covert narcissist. And I'm not
Yes.
going to go into any deep, I don't want, like, I'm not looking for any deep explanations on how all this stuff works. But what I found interesting was as I moved from one to the next, and I'm not going to go any further than that, I recognized, I mean, we all have narcissism in us, and part of it is the wounding too. It's
Yes.
like if you didn't pay attention to me, well, mom, dad, then damn it, pay attention to me.
Yes.
So we're all doing it, but in that light, I noticed that the stronger the narcissistic whatever it is in the person, like you said, the less chance that they can even recognize it, let alone heal it. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, the wounded empath spectrum or whatever. All right, well, thank you. That was really inspiring for me, and I really appreciate the information that you gave on that. And what I'd like to ask you next, and I think it's so important for people who are doing this healing work, so to speak, or the type of work that they do to help other people, is I've noticed that most people who go into this type of work have had a significant personal trauma that was used as a catalyst, maybe, to overcome to get into the work that you do. Can you give the audience some background or backstory on what that might be for you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so the whole reason why I've been doing this 18 years, been working on myself for 27 years is because of that. I always say that being a therapist chose me. I didn't choose it. And I know you asked that question before we were meeting, what's like kind of the starting point. And, there's several in childhood and both real and perceived and both that created the traumas that led me to the point I'm about to talk about. But like the major turning point was when I hit my bottom in my 20s at 27 years old. I'm successful, at least appearingly, as a young man on my own and, doing my thing and in my field of, my field of study and being successful and literally
Which was
dying.
different. Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but I want to
Yeah.
make sure that people, so your field of study was like totally different from what you ended up going into,
Yeah, because
right?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So what I did was,
A lot of people do
the
that.
quick backstory, yeah,
Yeah.
was so my family was in the steel industry,
Mm.
steel fabrication, my mom's side, and so I literally grew up in the steel yard and working from out in the shop, driving trucks, in the office. And so my uncle convinced me when I was in my sophomore year in college at UF to take building construction, which is one of the notable schools in the country, is building construction at University of Florida. And there's a short story on that, but he basically convinced me, and so I did it, and I loved it, the school of it, and I really loved all of the school. But once I graduated and
Yeah.
got into the real world
Yeah.
in 1993, and I was on this big job site working for this big corporation, I realized quickly this is not for me. However,
Right.
I did not leave it quickly.
Right.
So, I spent my 20s doing a thing I hated that I felt like I was going to be stuck for the rest of my life because I got my degree in it. I was moving up the ladder. I was a assistant construction manager, project engineer, working up the ladder and miserable, having to self-medicate with alcohol, and at the time heavily with THC and other types of substances to try to, still being very functional at work, but very dysfunctional in life. Um, and really felt like my whole life was going to be like that. I was going to be stuck in that and just absolute misery. And I just felt like I had to keep doing it. And until I eventually legitimately completely burned out with depression and anxiety in my late 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and this addiction to self-medicating for sure.
I'd like to
Um,
say something real quick that I've put
yes.
some of the stuff, like the words you said about I felt like I needed to do it.
Yeah.
I've learned over and over again, we have been programmed to feel that particular thing. Like the society as we were growing up, you got to get a good job, you got to stay at the same job for 20 years, that kind of thing. That's what we grew up with. So
Well, yeah. Well,
yeah,
I
so
mean,
that's
and I know
interesting.
you had your dad that did that. I had my mom that did that. My
Right.
mom, worked for the same office, the same as an office manager for a cardiologist for 53 years. So, yeah, I mean, so she was,
That's a
you know,
long time.
long time. And so, and then I felt like I had to do it. And then also my father, who he had, different businesses he started and left and started and left and started and very entrepreneurial. So that always was, I can't do that. So I had this immense familial pressure coming from within me and outside of me to stay in this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of the family business and, type of thing. I just hated it. Going back to now, here's one of the things that came to me. So being an empath, I didn't know that, especially in my 20s. I didn't know what any of that meant. I didn't know any of that, but I knew I was sensitive to what other people are doing and what's going on around me.
Right.
And being told that out of my family as a kid, don't be so sensitive, you know what I mean? And so I would self-medicate that. But in the construction field, construction, especially in the large commercial construction, building universities and hospital. I mean, this is what I was doing, Johnson and Wales University and Devonshire Estates and the big, assisted care facility and Baptist Hospital and all these different things I was on.
This is
It's
all in South Florida, just so
South
people know
Florida,
as
yeah,
well.
Miami-Dade,
Okay. Yeah,
Dade, Broward, and
Miami.
Palm Beach counties. I was
Yeah.
in all three counties. That's how I ended up here. But there's no sensitivity. It's good for people that just don't care. And I don't even mean that in a bad way. They just don't have any, they could be in the system and literally just try to win. It's about winning. I say that, at least in commercial construction, it's all these different parts and everybody's just trying to gain as much money that they can. And then there's a building that is built. And so I felt that highly, offended by that. I would have to lie and have to
Mm,
not, pay
wow.
people money that, following orders. And, and so
Yeah.
it was really destroying me. So it was even more so than I just didn't like the job. It was really, just like eating away at my soul.
Yeah,
It was
I get that.
literally the
I
lesson
really
that
get
I
that.
needed to learn.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
I mean, like having somebody who I know wasn't trying to work me, but they needed the money, and my, superior was telling me, no, just tell them we don't have it or it's coming next week or whatever. And yeah, and the guy's crying in my office and I'm about to start crying, you know what I mean? And I mean, I'm a young 20-something-year-old executive,
Right, right.
but I couldn't do it. So
Yeah.
when a variety of ways, I hit a bottom and I started seeing this therapist and I started to open up. I started to, stop using substances and I started to look at myself and open up spiritually and mentally and emotionally. And I knew I had to leave that, that place in my life. And I literally just jumped and I just jumped without a net. I left not just my job, but my career. I left the whole thing. And I just started working on myself for about a period of about 2 years. And as I was working on myself, I was doing groups and individuals and, what I mean, and therapy and recovery and, different 12-step groups and, therapy groups and all this different stuff all over. I mean, I was full every day, every night with that. It just came to me as I was in one of these groups, I called download. I'm all of a sudden getting a download of how to help this other, group member.
Mhm.
And I just started expressing it. And then right there, I knew, the therapist around me knew. It's like, wow, that's pretty good. And so I went full in. And that was in the turn of the century, as I like to call it now, 1999, 2000. And then I went all
That's a
in.
big year.
Yeah, right. And my life changed. And what the notable change was, though, the very notable change. And I didn't put it together till just recently. But the notable change was I went from this very kind of, kill or be killed, win or lose, don't get
Mhm.
defeated type lifestyle, not just career, but the whole lifestyle, to more one of that's an empath and sensitive and connecting with others. And basically, so that's how once I realized it. But here's what, again, so a young person, I was 30, 31, 32, 33. I graduated in '03. I was 33. But those first couple of years when I discovered this superpower of empathy, basically, and connecting with others and helping them, I went all out and I burned out that way. So then I went too far that way and I completely burned out. Anybody and
Pendulum.
everybody I met
Yeah.
and everybody and anybody who I connected with, and I wasn't even working as a therapist yet, but I'm helping everybody,
Yeah.
especially in 12-step recovery rooms and just wherever, and family and this and that, friends. And it was like 24/7. I couldn't get enough of it. Then I would take my first job working with kids in an intensive behavioral facility, which is basically code for a lockdown mental health facility. I loved it. But I mean, I would do 16 hours a day. I do double shifts, 16 hours off 8, back on 16. I'm just burning myself out. So I really, so it's an interesting process, right? I burned myself out from doing something I hated for so long. And then I burned myself out for doing something I loved. So I really had to find this balance. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? This
That's
balance.
it.
And,
That's the
that's
word.
really
It's
it. Yes.
balance. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So
I get
it's,
that.
yeah, it's not always this or that. It's, somewhere in between, and
We
that's
get
always
so
constantly moving.
intense. I mean, and I don't know if it's from trauma or from society's teachings or programming or whatever, but there's like, okay, well, I got to go do this. And now I think it's a societal thing because I don't think since I've started meditating more and I've started transcendental meditation, I don't feel that desperation to go this way
Yeah.
and push. It's almost now I never finished the book, but you may have, I don't know, Power versus Force.
Oh, yeah.
Can't remember. Yeah. It's like that. We all have we are all powerful. We all have the capacity to have power, but power is, for lack of better words, and I feel like I'm correct on this, is it's more of a receptive type of energy, like a feminine type, divine feminine type of energy, where force is like, wow, action, male
Right.
dominating,
Right.
nothing against men, that, but it's like a
Well, it's a
forceful type of
masculine or
energy.
feminine. And again,
That's
everything needs
yeah.
the balance.
Right. So that
But
you've got the
but
toxic male, the toxic female,
right.
the
Yes.
divine masculine, the divine feminine.
Right, right,
Everybody
right.
has both of the divine masculine and feminine inside of them. So
Right.
it's the balance,
And
but
finding that balance. I
right.
will say this. So we'll call it, maybe, just to use the word you just said, toxic, or I like better, wounded. The wounded
Yeah.
masculine in my first career left me hopeless. So it
Mhm.
was a different burnout. I was burnt out and I was hopeless and I'm just self-medicating. The wounded feminine of my second career in the beginning, when I just, started taking it on and just, all this kind of stuff, I never was hopeless. You know what I mean? I was burned out. I was exhausted.
You were giving too much.
But I was never right. I was never hopeless and I never had to self-medicate it.
Right.
I just, had to balance it. So that's my experience as being on both sides, is the wounded masculine basically destroyed me. The wounded feminine was destroying me too. However, it was easier to come back with because, yes, if you're giving too much, the key is to give to self. So what I talk about is the empathy with self.
Hmm.
When we, kind of get lost in some codependency, and the giving exhaustion is the empathy, give to self, take care of self so that I can be more selfless.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
that's really what, the practice has been for the last 20 plus years, in my life, especially my personal life, but definitely in my professional life as well.
Did you experience what people call a profound spiritual awakening or transformation? Like, did you have this thing
Yes.
happen? You did. Okay. All right. I'd love to hear that.
Well, I mean, I've had it a few times,
Okay.
uh, and it is like that. But, so the first time I had that was in college in my senior year, and was out in the playing drums. It's called Payne's Prairie at University of Florida. Me and my friends and all that, we were out in the woods, or the wetlands, and we'd get some bongos, and I love that. And all of a sudden there was a guitar, a steel string acoustic guitar. Now, I had played guitar when I was a kid, but I played electric in the 80s, you know what I mean? I was a rocker, playing AC/DC and
Long
Ozzy
hair?
Osbourne.
You had the hair?
I did, but shortly. I had the hair later, as
You
you
had the
know.
hair later? I know you had the hair later.
But
I
I
just want to
did,
know if
I
you had the
did,
hair when it was a
I
hair
did
band
in
time.
11th grade.
Okay.
That was 1987. I did have kind of a mullet, and then it just
Okay.
got too much and I cut it. But I did
Yeah.
have it for about 6 months. So when I got to college, it was different. It was a different time and but I picked up this acoustic guitar and I strummed it, and I had this, like, this is what I've been supposed to be doing. It's like, you can't put words on it,
Mm.
but I call it that spiritual awakening. This is me. This is who I am. This is what I'm supposed to do. It's so exciting, but it's also just so calming.
Yeah.
So that was my first one. The second one was in that I kind of just ran through it, but in that group that I was in, and when I had that download, because I wasn't trying to, like, how can I help this, we'll call her Mary, how can I help Mary here? I wasn't thinking or doing anything. I was just another group member, but we had known each other. We were in that group probably a year or so together every week with same kind of people. Sometimes we would change people, but for the most part, it just, all of a sudden I just knew what to tell her and to help her. And when I had that, I could feel the same kind of thing. Like, this is me. This is what I'm supposed to be, or how I'm supposed to be. I don't, again, I can't put words on it, but that's what I'm calling
Hmm.
a spiritual awakening. Like, I just know it's who I am, and who I always
Well,
was, who I always will be.
and
And I'm
that's some,
actually aligned with it. It's like an
yeah,
alignment,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's something that's really as you grow in your journey, there usually aren't words to put to stuff like this. So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've had a hard time explaining certain things, especially recently, that have happened. So that makes sense when you say that's not easy to put words to it, because it's just this thing. It's just a,
It's like an opening. Yeah,
yeah.
right. You just
Yeah, but
opened
it's an
up.
energy. How do you
And yeah,
explain an
right.
energy,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's interesting. I appreciate mine. Just to throw in something, mine was flipped. I was really interested in the helping people coaching aspect part of it throughout most of my life, but then you changed my world around when we met back in 2019. I had, when I was a child, I was involved in music. I played a few instruments. I sang. I was in chorus. I tried to, well, this is probably where my trauma came from, but I tried to go out for musicals, and never got whatever, because they always picked the favorites, whatever that was. And I stopped after I was raised Jewish. So I had my bat mitzvah. That was the last time I really sang. I did anything with singing. And then it wasn't until I met you, and then, oh my gosh, my entire world like opened up. So it felt that for me reminds me of what you just said about your spiritual awakening, because it was like, there was laughter, there was fun, there was music, there was songwriting, and you're downloading, and we're making all these songs, and as quickly as these songs came in, that blew me away too. And it was all part, and it was all part of the process. And when I go back, I know you don't do this because this was mine, but when I go back and listen to these songs, there's a journey in each song. It's weird. It is like, it's a process. It's the process that you and I went through in every song that we wrote. So we start off with, for example, The Long and Lonely Road, right? And we end up with going through deep, screaming, blah, 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 and we end up with Moments in Love. So we go back and look at that. So when I put that song to pictures, that was my intent, was to share the whole process in that last video that I put together for everything we did, because it was so empowering and powerful, and growth and chaos, and but look where we're at now. I think that's incredible. And so that's why my, you know, connection with music especially. So I appreciate the fact that you brought that up because, and I know how good you are, especially at the downloading piece of it. So there's not a whole, that's definitely, music's always a spiritual awakening.
Yeah,
It
no,
seems.
absolutely. Well, for those that are, kind of predisposed, I guess.
Well, I
Um,
mean, yeah, it's it in that respect, yes, and it's also very healing music in general.
well, of course.
I just
Yeah.
had a conversation with Sam Delahaye
Yeah.
a
Right.
couple of
Yeah.
weeks ago, and that's what we talked about. It's like you're talking about frequencies and, you
Yeah.
know, where she went through and how it works in the body. Well, you and I have talked about all this kind of stuff
Yes.
before. It's like how it affects
Solfeggios.
the
Yes.
body. Yeah, yes.
Right.
And it's just so interesting, and I just want to end with this piece of it with the music. It's like how we were brought together on the frequency piece of it was what the fact that I was a massage therapist and I understood how the 432 hertz worked inside of the body to help heal the body. And then when we met and you told me that you had your guitar tuned to 432 hertz, my whole world flipped upside down because
Mm.
of that. Because I thought that
Yeah.
was the greatest thing, you know. And then as we move forward, and then at the very end, did a few songs in 444, which is a solfeggio frequency at is it A or something? I don't understand.
Yeah.
That's a whole
Well,
nother
it's
conversation
the
too.
12, 444 is the 12, which is the three. So 369 are the solfeggio.
Right, and that's also the Tesla numbers too. So it
Yeah.
all goes into math. That's what we talked about. It goes into math and it goes into
Yeah.
sacred geometry and it goes into all music and all this stuff goes together. So it's so interesting how it relates to the healing of our soul or the healing of the healing of our soul, the healing of our humanness, why we're here, why we're talking, you know, why this podcast came to be, those different things. You know what I'm saying? So it's just interesting how it comes full circle to me.
Yes.
So yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a big part of my life. And yes, the music we did, I do listen to occasionally, and I do feel. I mean, they were a big part of my. I mean, right, putting those songs together, and what's the word for it? Composing. You know what I mean? Because it's not
Yeah,
just you just sing over a tune. So
yeah,
yeah, it was fun. All that stuff. Yeah, as I go back through my journey with music, that started in really, when I was 13, but really started in that moment in 1992, where I started. And then I wrote my first song in 93, a couple months later, because I was at the end of 92. In 93, I wrote my first song and then I started singing. And that was another thing. I never thought I could or knew I would sing. And so that expression, that development of that vulnerability and being a
mm-hmm.
sensitive person, singing is, again, it's like, and I'd say most singers have that sensitivity, that allow themselves to sing. And just like you just said, whether you're a singer or not, anybody who, sings in the shower, or sings in the car, or sings, you know what I mean? That's also a good way to release, when everything is getting so intense inside, to emotionally regulate,
Mm-hmm.
or regulate the central nervous system as well, is to be able to sing. It's just
Yeah,
it's just knowing that when we're sensitive as empaths or sensitive, highly sensitive people, we're also sensitive to what other people think. And then
mm-hmm.
that's the next level, is releasing that. But yeah,
Yeah,
it all kind of
exactly.
comes
Well,
full
that's when you
circle
want to
here.
go see Sam if that's what you're interested
Yeah,
in,
there you
because she
go.
teaches that.
That's right.
By
That's
the way,
beautiful.
yeah,
That's
I'll
beautiful.
throw in a plug on this one.
Plug it, plug it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because I'm going to throw this one part in where they're doing a lot of research and helping people with healing the body through the vagus nerve
Mm.
and
Yes.
chanting and humming and like putting your teeth together and just going, just that in and of itself, not with any singing or anything, but the singing is directly related to the vagus nerve. And when you sing, it doesn't matter what your voice sounds like, you're still healing your body. You're expressing yourself, you're clearing your throat chakra, you're clearing all the energies out, and it opens up an expression most of us have had locked down throughout our lives.
Yes.
So that's huge. Again,
Yeah.
like Noel was
Yeah.
saying, go sing in the shower. Believe me, keep doing it. It'll
Yeah.
help. You don't have to be
And the car. The car is
and
good
the car.
too, you know? Yeah.
You know that. Yeah, we have. I
Yeah.
share that song with everybody. It's not just singing in the car; it's yelling in the car. Yeah. So Rage Against the Machine's a good one if you
That's
really
right.
want to get that stuff
Release.
out, right?
That's
Yep.
right.
You
That's
remember
right.
that, right?
Right.
So, okay. Can you explain how to become aware of self for awakening?
Okay. Well, so when you say self, so there's
With the big S. With
yeah,
the big
that's what I
S.
was thinking of, right? Which is basically soul, right? It's the witness. So, over the years, reading people like Eckhart Tolle or Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul,
Yes.
or it's different, or any of the Indian gurus, Maharaji or Nisargadatta, or then even Ram Dass, stuff like that. It's about witness. It's about sitting in the witness of like who is the one thinking, who is the one doing, who's the one saying, who's the one experiencing and feeling. When as human consciousness, we can actually, through different practices, and meditation is a huge one, but different practices of contemplation, meditation, allowing ourselves, we can actually sit outside of our
Mhm.
experience and still experience it. And so that part is the higher self, is the capital L self. Whereas the one that's caught in it is the mind, which is based on the ego. And I don't mean that as a bad word. Ego kind of gets a bad rap as the word, but I don't mean it. It's
Yeah.
just that's what we come into existence here when we leave here. So when we die, we leave two major things. We leave the body and we leave the ego, the mind. But what's left? What is left when we leave? What was here before as we were born into our mother's wombs, created from the two cells into, the miracle. What is that? It's the energy beyond that, who we are. So it's really who we are. It's not what we are, it's being in
Mhm.
this world, not of this world. And so the way that I've, come to realize that, because it's really a realization, and then I guess an actualization, and then a transcendence.
Yeah.
um but the realization is through just being open and honest and humble with self and another, and having that vulnerability and that exploration of letting go through the pain and the suffering of
Mhm.
whatever happened, whatever's happening, and to hold space and to be held through that. And in that exploration, it just kind of lines up that, oh
Mhm.
wait, this is who I really am.
Mhm.
By
Mhm.
practice, we develop practices and we started doing certain things, and spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, and socially, who we connect with and how we connect with others. And that's really, to me, how I've engaged, and still do,
Mhm.
in this higher self, and opening up to that.
What I notice is that, you and I had growth during the process that we went through. We had, but when we separated and we moved into our own space, like you were talking about, and we healed, it was almost like it exponentially made us connect better with each other when we went inside of ourselves without the other person like in our face the whole time.
Yeah,
Did you
no, yeah, I'd agree with that. That makes sense, because being kind of stuck in that interplay, we
Mhm.
take roles, you know what I mean? And it's hard to unroll no matter how conscious you are,
But this
you
gave
know?
us the opportunity to like step out,
Yeah.
not only step out and observe ourselves during the process that when we were learning about ourselves during that, but then it kind of incorporated how we saw everything happen within that relationship to make it like this bigger understanding. So the bigger self stayed aware, the bigger self stayed, or the big S self stayed present and observed and all that, while the little s allowed it to happen, which was interesting too. In both, and I feel like for both of us it happened that way because if we're not willing, the little s, if the little s isn't willing to do the work, then there's not much the big S can do. in healing if there's no willingness and
Well,
decision to
yeah,
do
and
it.
that's part of the lesson of the life, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the little s, the ego, the mind, that sense of self that's here, uh, you know, is here, whatever, based on whatever lessons or reasons the soul, is trying to get here. So you're right, that's where we kind of the self-will.
Hmm.
But when we line up self-will with a higher will, with, this energy of source, this energy of something greater than ourselves, and the universe, source, God, whatever that is for each individual, then we line up with, our egos takes a step, little s self takes a step to the side. So it lets us through that process of humility
Hmm.
and willingness, and then the honesty and the depth of the honesty, and then the integrity within our actions on how we hold ourselves,
And that's
you
how
know.
you have described in the past the open heart thing.
Yeah, right. The open-hearted, instead of, going from that sense of self, the higher self, and then just engaging with whomever, whatever, whichever is in front,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
next thing to do.
Yeah.
And and again, and then obviously not being perfect, and not being, this avatar of spiritual awakening, just being human, you know what I mean, and having the human frailties and foibles, and but again, like you said, knowing that and being willing to own it and look at it and process it, and I get that experience every day with my daughter, because it was just yesterday we were grocery shopping, and she said something about her day, and I made a joke, and she got very upset, and I'm like, okay, and then later that evening, last night, she said, I was thinking about the reason why I was upset is because you're my safe place and where I can be vulnerable. And when you make fun of me, it really makes me feel bad. It makes me feel unsafe and and I was like, wow. And I just understood. And when I understood, I made sure I didn't say, well, but, I was just being funny. That's what I wanted to say. The little s wanted to say.
Uh-huh.
I just come on, I'm just taking a joke, which is what like my father would say to me, or anybody I've ever
But
grew up
that's where the
with would just say,
woundedness comes in.
don't be so right, don't be
Yeah.
so
Don't be so
sensitive.
sensitive.
It's
Right.
not my fault. I'm just trying to be funny. You're being, I wasn't
Yeah.
meaning anything.
Yep.
So I
Good catch.
really was sensitive to not do that. But the little s self and wanted to do that, needed to do that. But I knew that, being present with this for a long time now. And
Mm.
the time length of practicing does help with this. And I just said, no, I understand that. I'm
Yeah.
really sorry that I did that. I was wrong for doing that.
Wow.
And
That's
she just
such, go ahead. Finish.
appreciated it. Well, no,
Yeah.
she just appreciated it and then just shook it off,
But
which, I never would have done when I was a kid
right.
because I never could have.
Oh my gosh, which is why I've got to say this. So the kids coming in nowadays are so much more aware. The fact that she's 11 years old, people, she's 11 years old
Yeah.
and she's aware enough to recognize what's going on within herself and set a boundary with her father. Like, how many people in our age group, age 50 and up or 45 and up, can
Yeah.
say the same thing? I know I couldn't do that. There's no way I
Right.
would have stood up to my father like that ever. I didn't
Well,
know. I mean,
yeah.
I knew he wouldn't, spank me or hit me or anything like that, but the wrath
He
of
would
my
probably
dad yelling, holy
right. And he would
crap.
dismiss it. He'd be more upset.
Yes,
Yes, right, right.
yes,
And
yes.
that's what mine would have done. And then you learn not to, not just because of the fear, but because there's no point in it. And
Right,
then you feel like there's something wrong with you. So
right, right.
so
But
yeah, I
it's,
mean, so that really, I'm really grateful that she does and can do that,
yes,
and that I'm
yes,
able to help to foster and facilitate that by
yes.
just owning it,
That's
because
amazing.
nothing in my small, regular egoic mind wanted to do that.
Nothing in your teaching gave you that.
But everything, right, everything in,
She's
the
teaching
work,
you.
right, and in the work says, no, I need to make the amends, be
Yeah.
open, own what it is, accountability,
Hmm.
responsibility. And so again, and that just happened literally less than 24 hours ago. So it is always an
That's
opportunity,
always an
to
opportunity.
practice.
And
Yeah.
that's amazing. I want to make a little, put a little point in here is that the children that are coming into this world, there's two things that I'm learning about that. Well, and I've known it known it for a while, but I was just watching to see what would happen until it started getting talked about. The kids are the ones who are gonna help us get through all this stuff. It's not us, because we're, I don't know. I mean, we're guiding them when they need it, but it's them that's going to get us through. And then the fact that there's so many of these kids coming onto this planet at this point who have this awareness and understanding, because there are people around them now. Well, they come in with it. Not only do they come in with it, but there's people around them who give them the opportunity to fully express who they are without crushing them.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's why this time period is so important for, she's an empath, she's highly sensitive also, and it's so important for them blossom as who they are. That's the truth. We're looking for it. They just need to blossom. We just need to guide them in blossoming. And I think
Yeah.
that's so incredibly important. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's wonderful. And I know his daughter, so I'm excited. So I'm looking for strategies that you have used on your healing journey that could help highly sensitive people and empathic people, but also the newer ones coming in who are challenged with being empathic or sensitive, who are saying like, it's a curse, it's this, it's that. Can you kind of go over, in connection with what's going on in the world and maybe why it's going on, to loop back into why being an empath is not a curse? And then
Well,
also
no,
maybe
yeah.
share, like I said, maybe share some strategies that you've come across that might help that.
Okay. So, right. It's funny using that word, it's a curse, because whatever's a curse is a blessing. Whatever's a blessing can be a curse. And, and it's just how we're taking it. Again, what are we taking it from? Are we taking it from our highest self? Are we taking it from our, scared egoic self? Now, the only reason why we're even stuck in a scared egoic self at 30, 40, 50, 60 years old is because of the trauma, right? So that the work has to be done on healing the trauma within. So, there's a great, slogan in Al-Anon. It's my favorite slogan. All the slogans in 12 Steps Recovery. This is my favorite one. Let it begin with me. So, when there's, yeah, absolutely, we could be in this relationship that's absolutely just untenable. The person is just not, they're just egregious. You know what I mean? I mean, that's for sure. But what's my part? What am I doing? What am I contributing in it? What am I creating? What am I co-creating? What am I attracting? What am I manifesting? What am I? And we don't just sit there and do that and berate ourselves. We need to do that with a sense of love and connection. And so that takes a minute, and we do need the support of others to help hold the space and practice that,
And
and
there's
then be able to do
understanding
that.
in there too, right? You have being able to understand, have an understanding of yourself, or giving
Yes.
yourself understanding, like being
Well, giving yourself
gentle.
the empathy that you
Yeah.
deserve, you know what I mean?
Gentleness. Yeah.
The gentleness. Yes, that's, absolutely. And yeah, no, it when it becomes a curse, because it's funny, because I have that going on. And again, right now, as I'm trying to have people follow up on their word or what they're doing. These are people that are working for me or whatever, in whatever capacity in my own. They're not, and they're pretty much basically don't give an F, you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
the lower side of me is, insulted, incensed, scared, and, wants to fight and fight harshly. But the higher self in me is always like, settle down, easy does it, because it's not because win or loss. It's because doing that sometimes is a time to fight. And that's the other thing. Sometimes there is a time to stand up, deliver, say what you need to say. I like to say what you mean what you say, don't say it mean the best of your ability, and let it go. Whatever that person has, they have it. That's all okay. But to react and to try to win and gain that, just scorch earth, everybody's losing, especially me. So in that highly sensitivity where I'm picking up on that stuff, I need to set it down, have the boundary. That's not mine, that's theirs. What do I need to do? And I have my own work and my own way, my supports that I ask. I have my own inner supports. People call them their guides or their angels or their, higher selves or the, different parts of aspects. but you know, we can meditate and connect and pray and you know, and connect with this, what is in the greater good for me and everyone involved. And it's interesting, it has to be in that order. So like somebody who's narcissistic and does it in that order, it's BS, right? What's great is good for me, you know, because they're coming from the little s, the egoic self, the wounded child.
Mine.
Right. Yeah, the wounded child. So, but the empath, the highly sensitive person that's wounded, and you know, yes, what's in my greatest good here? Because I will still be giving and loving in nature. I can't, you know, empty myself out and then, you know, hope that somebody else gets it. And if and when they don't, I'm like just even more empty and desolate and, you know, just, you know, despairing.
Yeah.
And so, and yeah, and at this phase of my life and the work I've done and continue to do and all the work I do to help people, I still end up in that. You know, I could wake up at 3 a.m. and
Because
just
you're
have that.
human.
Exactly. And so I'm here to say, and you know, maybe give me another 30 years, you know, who knows, but maybe I'll have it by then, I'm the guru, but you know what I mean? I'm here to say that no matter how much I still have it, the key is I, you know, impart and, you know, ingrain the connections to higher self, connections to power greater than self, and the connections to others where I can find that and, you know, release and then have a strategy of the next right thing that can happen. And generally it's going to happen regardless, but when it happens like that, it's just so much more at
Yeah.
ease, you know? It's
Yeah.
like, you know, it's not like fighting the fight and the battle and that's why on social
Well,
media,
that's what
I
we're
don't want to
taught to
fight the
do.
battle, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people are battling, you don't even know what they're barking on. They got the megaphones out,
Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah, you're threatening me and all this
What's
stuff.
so crazy
It's
is that they're
like,
fighting each other and they're not even looking inside of themselves. Excuse me.
right.
All right, I
Oh,
said it.
sure.
I
You
said it.
said it. You're
Okay.
on record. All
Yeah,
right.
it's on
So,
record.
but
But
that's, but
but
let it begin with me again.
right.
Let
Well,
me look at what I'm doing so I can make sure my side is clean so I can really be that person.
yeah, exactly. And it's so interesting because this, like, that curse thing was just disturbing me for a while because well, now it was kind of disturbing. Back then, I kind of felt the same way. When I learned in my 30s about being an empath, and then I was like, yeah, probably thought to myself, yeah, it's a curse. I don't want to deal with it. I did research. I'm like, I don't understand it. I got too many people around me who don't get me. I don't even want to go there right now. And then now, after having been through the layers of healing and releasing and learning, you know, for me, like how to stop dissociating and regulate and learning how to regulate myself and, you know, all these things that ah it took years to do. Now I'm at a point where it doesn't feel like a curse. And you were right. It's like you can look at it in both directions, but know that, and I know you and I tend to agree on this, because we've talked about it before outside of here. It's like we chose to be here at this time on this planet, experiencing these things that we're experiencing. So if that's the case, then just work through the process and allow it and learn acceptance and learn forgiveness and do those things, you know, and especially with yourself. And it unbecomes the curse as you go through that, because then you start to connect with yourself and you start to open up and it doesn't feel bad anymore. I think a lot of the piece of the curse is like you're soaking in all these other energies from people that you don't understand how not to do it. And when you start to understand how to not take their energies in, it won't be so much of a curse, because
Exactly.
that's the curse part to me.
And that's the healthy boundaries. But again, the
Right.
key to a healthy boundary is not what we're doing out here. It's what we're
Right.
doing here. Because if I'm doing this, but I break it
Yeah.
constantly inside of me,
Yep.
then it's not this. And then it's more
Yeah.
of a mixed message. And that's what I'm doing to contribute
Yeah.
to even to a person that's very egregious, you know?
Yes. Yep.
So and again, and I, you know, don't want people to think for any reason it's like victim blaming or you know what I mean. It's not. It's like I don't want to be a victim. I mean, I don't want to ever be a victim. And sometimes I'll be victimized, but that's part of being in life. But you know, what do I need to do to learn from that and to end that and to move forward through that? And sometimes that's not so simple, but it's always simple. And no, wait, it's always simple. Sometimes it's not easy.
Easy.
And
Yeah.
in the sense that because then I have to like really start with me, let it begin with me.
Right,
That's
right,
literally the way, and then yeah, sometimes it's just a meditation, it's a prayer, it's a phone call, it's a cry, it's a scream, a yell, it's whatever the case may be,
right.
running around the block, whatever the next thing is that I need to do that creates that sense of taking care of self in that vulnerable way, in that open way, like you said, with the open heart.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting. You did say something that that I want to this part of the conversation. I want to close out unless you have something you want to say about it after. You had said, "I don't want to be a victim." So what I've learned is that the vibration or frequency of words and the way the universe hears words, certain words, create our experience. So when we say, I don't want, the universe hears want, it doesn't hear don't. So what I hear, or it hears from what I understand, is I want to be a victim. So it continues bringing opportunities for you to learn how to not be a victim, right? So something, and something more powerful that I've learned to do myself is to use the word choose, because you're putting yourself in a more powerful stance where you won't accept being a victim. So I choose not to be a victim, or I choose to not be a victim. Or even better, I choose to be sovereign or something like that. So it's really tricky. That's one of the things that I've had a hard time with over the years, to not say those words that hold those frequencies and to shift the words. And I've noticed changes occurring around that. So I just wanted, this wasn't like by any means a slam on
No, no,
this
and
conversation or
I,
whatever, but you know what I mean? Does that?
yeah, no, I totally agree with you. For using it as, I mean, again, every time you say something, you're using it, right? So it doesn't matter if it's affirming it or not. It's the statement. But here's my experience with working with people in this empathic, highly sensitive, and the trauma bond of being stuck in it and creating a life that's still there with, very disingenuous and challenging relationships, is that they do feel like that, and they, you know what I mean? So you got to kind of use the words to get out of the words. But I absolutely agree with you to,
Yes, yes.
because you need to get the identification,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
then you need to release from it. But yeah, no, you definitely, don't want to use that word in the sense, because yeah, like there's different words of choice, sovereign,
Mm-hmm.
sovereignty, but
Mirror
whole,
work works really well with those words too. Standing in front of
yeah,
the mirror, like, I choose to be sovereign versus
yeah,
I don't want to be a victim,
right.
that kind of thing. Yeah. So, all right. So at the end of every session I have with people, I ask a few questions and I ask them to everybody. So are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. What does awakening mean to you at this time on the planet?
Becoming aware. So I use the word aware, becoming aware of who we are and how we can get there, and becoming aware of what's going on around us. And also learning our sense of boundaries within ourselves and others to not engage in the problem or the difficulty or the challenge that's being created, around us. That we can only control what's within us. So the awakening is to be awakened to that and then shift from external focus to internal so that we can
Mm-hmm.
impart change.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you said that, because the next question is, what is soul divinity to you?
Yeah, well, that would be, to me, soul divinity is the purpose, so the purpose we have here. And again, earlier on, you asked about my awakenings. All that was an alignment with my purpose. So the soul divinity, I aligned my consciousness with that, with the music, and then with the therapist,
Mm-hmm.
therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and it's happened on varying degrees since as well. Yeah, so soul divinity is the purpose of why I'm here, why you're here, why we're here, and to be that, to
Mm-hmm.
the best of our abilities, which is not fixing or changing anything. It's just being who we really are.
Or being perfect. I mean,
Yeah,
we
it's not
really,
being perfect, right? It's
right.
just be ourselves, which includes making mistakes, and then
Mhm.
but then also includes owning them and and growing.
Yes. Great. I like that. Okay. Well, the next question is, what is God or source? Or whatever you
Yeah, God, source, they're just words pointing to truth, to all, to what really is. You know, my consciousness connects to that there's nothing but God. There's nothing but source. There's nothing but the energy of this higher, I don't even call it a being, this higher energy of source, and that we're all manifestations or extensions of that
Mm,
in the connection with that.
yes.
And everything we do, right, wrong, good, bad, and all this is connecting with that kind of energy that's always, here. It's infinite, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It always has been, always is, and always will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. What is unconditional love?
So to me, unconditional love is just pure love. It's of source. So there's no loss. It's absence of loss, unconditional love, because it's just love, and
Mm-hmm.
love is infinite. So you can't have loss when there's infinite. So the unconditional love of self, of another, of life, of anything else is just being in the energy that there's no loss. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Even things come and go, situations come and go. We grieve, we have loss, but in the unconditional love, we go beyond that. That's why it's so hard to kind of get it and stay in unconditional love, but that is really the essence of all. And so that's where grief eventually leads us to, and that acceptance is the unconditional love.
And grief is very important as
Oh
part of
yeah,
the process, and
the
we
transition.
we have been
Yes,
taught not to grieve.
not to. Yes,
Yeah,
because it's too hard.
it's too
So
hard
in
to
that
feel the
there's a
feelings.
condition, right?
Yeah.
So there's conditions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why even love within that is conditional.
Yeah.
So that's why the grief leads us to the unconditional, but it's very painful. But that's what'll actually get us to this beyond loss, this infinite is the
Right.
unconditional.
Yeah. And what's interesting is the reason we grieve is because we have loved.
Well, of
And
course, or
it's
else we
such
wouldn't grieve
we're
at all, right? There would be
exactly,
no,
exactly.
yeah,
So it all loops in together in
yeah,
many different ways. So grieving just expresses our gratitude for the love that we had or
yes.
still have. I mean, it's still there.
Well,
It's
and
just
that
in a
one that's
different
still
form.
there is the unconditional. That's the
Yes.
love that's
Yes.
still there.
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much for those. That was awesome. I appreciate you. You know that. I mean, we've been through a lot. Well, I wouldn't be sitting here to having this conversation with you had we not. I am very grateful for that. I just want to say that I'm glad you came on and we could have this conversation. In that space, I want you to let people know how they can get in touch with you if they choose to reach out.
Okay. So yeah, so my website is my name, Noel New, Noelneu. That's noelnew.com. So you can just go to noelnew.com. It's NEU. Sometimes I swallow the E. And then, or Instagram is one of my big ones. That's my main platform, but it's the Noel New. But I'm on TikTok and YouTube, and
You're on TikTok? You got brave, huh?
yeah, it's not my favorite, but
I
I do
know.
like Instagram.
I
But
know.
you gotta put it out there.
Uh,
So LinkedIn, all of them. But Instagram's my main one, and so I have the content that's released through that. But yes, you can catch me on the Noel New and on Instagram, and noelnew.com is my website.
okay. Okay. And there's other things that'll lead to like your music and stuff like that.
Yeah, on there I have my music medicine. I'm on Spotify. I'm on all Apple Music, all that. My music is on that. I call it music medicine. It's on my website. But yes, any type you can get a free consultation with me on my site. More blogs and stuff on this, and upcoming book and podcasts and things like that.
Oh, you're doing a podcast too. We have to talk.
Well, that's down the road.
Okay. We'll talk.
Yes, we will.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we go?
I'm grateful. This is very good. I appreciate it. Yeah, and the growth we've had together. Before this, you texted me 3 years ago. We had our own podcast called Growth Made Groovy, and so we're going through the music on this day 3 years ago.
Yeah,
So
it's Christmas
yeah,
time.
yeah, right. Great
Yeah, that's the
song.
one we talked about.
So yeah, all the growth along the way. That's the best word for it. And yeah, just I'm grateful for you and to be able to share this with you as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful day. And everyone, thank you for watching. And I hope you got a lot out of this. And any information that Noel shared as far as connecting with him will be in the description below. So have a beautiful day. Thank you.